Kaymakchalan, October 1916.
While I was in the army, we had to do military history, and that got me onto the military side as well as just general history. And but then, as I started to realise that all those photographs in my family albums meant something, there were people in uniform, my grandfather and great uncle, and I realised they were in the Serbian army, and they were in something called First World War, or the Balkan Wars even before, and it just sort of stayed in the background. I started to realise that there were Australians involved in Serbia in World War I as well, and that started me on a fairly long journey of digging up interesting people who had served in Serbia or with the Serbs in World War I, which was almost totally unknown generally here in Australia.
It's very, very close, Bojan. In fact, it's a week today when I fly out.
I know,
So,
you're going ahead of me, aren't you? Yeah.
I am. So I arrive a full day ahead of you. So I've got the luxury of perhaps having an extra night or so sleep ahead of you flying in. I guess we'll have a little bit of elevation there, though, won't we? Where I did see around Anissa and so on in the southern areas that it's probably a little bit cooler, but we'll cope.
No, you're right. We are going south, but we're going up as well. You're right. Yes, when we go to the battlefield of Dobropolje, which is the good field, that will be up in the hills, and it will be cooler. And Kaymakchalan's the same, can be pretty windy. So I'd make sure you've got a parka or something that you can put on.
First Australians that arrived in Serbia in late 1914 were mainly women. In many cases, for example, in the example of the Scottish women's hospitals, these were women who came from a background of being suffragettes. We have an Australian who became a famous author afterwards, Stella Miles Franklin, after who is named the highest literary award in Australia. Miles Franklin volunteered to serve in one of these Scottish women's hospitals with Mary de Garis, who is great niece is coming with me to Belgrade. One of the most awful things that I learnt and then I've been telling other people through these books and so on, is that Serbia suffered the highest rate of death proportionate to population of all participants in World War I.
Although Cocky came from a very privileged and wealthy family, none of them felt that that was of any great value in itself. There wasn't a sense of this is a really superior way to live. There was a real sense that it was something given, not something they owned. And thinking about Cocky in her life in Serbia, which was the happiest time of her life, I think that just epitomises that she, and we too, we don't hold on to that privileged background. It's like the real world is about real people, and I think Cocky really felt that, and she so loved Serbia and so loved those people that she lived with and worked with.
The medal, it's a Royal Order of St. Sava, is given to people who are contributed in humanitarian sort of way to the betterment of the Serbian people.
So here's a picture that was taken in the First World War.
Yeah.
And you can see the British Red Cross flag there.
Yeah.
So this was their accommodation, and this was another place where the patients were operated on. They had a third building as well called a Villa Avila.
Yeah.
And I've seen Villa Avila, I think.
Well, it's in that. You've got it in that book, haven't you?
We've got it in this book over
and
here.
And here too.
Because when I was there in 2009, I met Jelena Dimic, who wrote this book.
Yeah.
And so here are these two buildings again.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know how to pronounce them, Bojan, those names. How do you pronounce them?
That's Latibor, yeah. So
And the one on top?
is Shumadir, I think.
I never saw these. I took notice of them when I was there before. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they look like now, because these were places that Ethel with her Red Cross unit were working from and living in. And,
no, it's fantastic. I really look forward to seeing them.
Yeah.
And so lucky that they still exist.
I think he was the love of her life. That was the feeling that was around in the family, and that both his family and her very conservative father were not in favour of the match becoming a marriage. And it was seen to be a sadness about her that both our father and his other sister Hazel would talk about, and it was just obviously somebody that she was deeply in love with.
One of the, I think, beneficial aspects of this is that the way it has transformed the idea of what women could do in war. And this comes out by talking to descendants now as they are realising the depth of the service and the sacrifice that was involved.
Kaymakchalan, October 1916. The snow falls harshly on their chilling limbs, that ere the passing of a few short hours pulsed full of eager life. Ah, God, if I were God, I'd open wide the door of heaven and make it rain soft flowers, sweet with the breath of their own blackbirds' plain. Sun-kissed and glowing, to make warm again the last retreat of those who fight no more. Hast thou no mercy? Even mankind knows that might should ever help to weakness show. And yet, thou God Almighty, didst allow these helpless heroes here to give their lives, here when but a few hours' march from home.